It's risky. He targets hospitals, he targets health workers, and now he is preventing health access. It's a torture mechanism outside of jail. He tortured you in jail. Outside of the jail, as a parent, he tortured you with your kid.
On this episode of TCF World, we invite Marcell Shehwaro and James Sadri to talk about the stories of Syrians still suffering in the country's civil war and the challenges of maintaining interest in the West. This is episode 8 of TCF World Podcast. I'm Thanassis Cambanis in Beirut. Hi, this is Thanassis Cambanis. I'm here in Beirut with Marcell Shehwaro. Hi, Marcell.
Hi.
Marcell is an activist from Aleppo who is now based between Beirut and Istanbul. Today we're going to talk about a campaign that she's in the middle of to bring attention to a sieged area in Syria that has attracted a lot less attention in the West than her hometown, Aleppo, did a year ago when it finally fell to the Syrian government's forces, but which is maybe just as important in the trajectory of Syria's uprising. To get us started, Marcell, tell us what is Ghouta and what is happening there right now?
Ghouta is an area where 400,000 people live still in there. And they are besieged completely since February. When I say completely, means nothing is entering in or out. And when I say nothing, means no medicine, no kids' toys, no stationery, no food. Anything basics you can look around now and you can buy, it's not entering Ghouta.
So this is like a place where nearly 500,000 people live?
Yeah.
City?
It's kind of, we have basic major cities, Douma, and around it is many villages, so it's a large area. Close to Damascus, 10 kilometers from Damascus, where UN Damascus is still functioning, and many organizations considering going back now. So it is that close. It was besieged early 2013 and attacked by chemical weapons on August 2013 in the incidents that is well known.
Yeah, this is Eastern Ghouta is the famous site of the awful chemical weapons attack in 2013 that almost but didn't provoke a U.S. response. That was the red line
when
that was crossed and
Obama
uncrossed.
red line is not that red, and when they said, okay, give us the chemical weapon and we're gonna forgive you for it, and that's happened.
So 4.5 years ago, we all stopped paying, or not all of us, but many people stopped paying attention to this place. And you're saying since then it's been under siege by the government of Syria.
Yeah, locals created some solution, a tunnel to Berzif, where war economy played a huge role in what enters and what didn't enter. In February, we lost that tunnel because Berzif is back to the regime control. So there is no tunnels anymore, and it's
when was that?
February.
February.
And it's totally besieged. Why no one knows about it? For many reasons. And I'm not a big fan of blaming the ignorance. First, because the situation in Syria lasted for a long while, and because many generations that are alive now doesn't remember war. So it's not realistic for them in 2017 to try to imagine how siege looks like. How, if you want to have a birthday party, for example, I wanted to do a birthday party to a friend in there, how this is a planning or 4 or 5 days to have a cake. A really, really small and expensive cake. It took me 4 days to see who knows one who have eggs, who know one who have. So just to collect the ingredients for a simple cake, it was a whole week mission.
So from Beirut, you coordinated the assembly of the ingredients for a cake inside Eastern Ghouta?
Yeah, it was in Istanbul actually, and I decided that I don't want to do the basic gifts that cost less maybe. I wanted to do something that we do for a friend in outside of siege. I wanted to do
In normal life.
yeah, in normal life, because I think that he needed a normal approach. So this is the siege. Before working on the campaign, my knowledge on the siege was also general. Yeah, Eastern Ghouta is besieged. There is 500,000. But what does that mean? I didn't get it in the details. Working in the campaign and working with like activists from Ghouta, I started to realize, and daily the question pump up in my mind. What do you do about shampoo? What do you do about cleaning materials? Because they are creating everything. And most of the time, many of these products are not good, are not healthy.
So they're making their own shampoo.
Yeah, they are making their own shampoo, they are making their own cleaning material. Last month, someone created another equation for salt, and it was poisoned. It didn't work
So
out.
they were finding a chemical substitute for salt.
Yeah, and it was poisoned. And many went into hospital because of it. So this is when what's besieged mean in a daily life. I talked 2 days ago with a woman who is expecting a child in Ghouta. And I asked her, what you gonna do for the new clothes? You're having a new kid that is her first child, and she would need new clothes for him. So she will go to the neighborhood to see who had old clothes, either to buy it from them or they will give it for her for free. And then later on, when her kid is 1 year old, she needs to give it back to someone else. So this new clothes for a new child will be used 10 times, 15 times among the neighborhood. So these details, what was missing in the picture. Mainly because many narrative about Syria forgot that there are civilians. People identify Syria as armed groups are fighting together, and they forget that we do exist. We are human, as women, as kids. We do exist in that land, and we have babies, we fall in love, we fight, we have birthdays. This is missing, and the besieged make even communication is harder. Because sometimes they have to work for 4 hours to find baby milk. I had an appointment with Aus, a really dear friend who was with me in the college in Aleppo. And he came late and said I needed to go and work before it's night to find a baby milk. And I had to work for 4 hours to find a baby milk for my daughter. So, of course, this has paralyzed your life. And this is why he besieged. Many people say, why he besieged an area? Yeah, to kill people, to punish people, but also...
You're talking about why is Bashar al-Assad...
Yeah, why Bashar al-Assad
besieging people?
besieging? Because this is a question always. Those who didn't believe the horror of war, and they think, why the hell he's doing it? He's doing it to paralyze people like us. Aus used to be a non-violence activist, really outspoken against all the military actions and all dictatorship and terrorism. Ended up having to spend half of his day on water, electricity, food. So he is paralyzing us on the daily details of a normal being.
So a year ago when Aleppo finally fell, there was, although there was not really much of an international response, there was a huge amount of attention paid. I think many of the people listening to our conversation will be surprised to learn that there's another area under siege that has maybe more people in it today than Aleppo did at the end of its siege. So this turns out to be a war that's not over, which I think will be news to many people.
People talking about ceasefire and like
de-escalation
agreements
zones.
and de-escalation zones, and like one time a friend of mine opened the Skype and he was showing me the how they are being bombed, and so if this is de-escalation zone, I don't think I'm getting the term right, because if now it is quiet, what bombardment looks like. And that's the bullshit of Geneva, Satana, that people lost attention and they feel that the war is over, and you will read it, the war is over, Bashar al-Assad won. Last year the planet got crazy.
So with Trump and Brexit, there's not much bandwidth left to think about.
And Europe,
400,000
and Europe,
people.
and who's gonna win the election in Europe, and all these questions around. Even the coup in Turkey and failing coup, and that's why people may not know about Ghouta, and because media thinks they don't care, so they don't cover enough. They will cover sexy story. They think that people want to hear about ISIS, about the sex life of ISIS. And I don't think that this is what the people really want, but this is what the media want us to think, that this is it. And right now, part of the purpose of what I'm doing is, I think we can just have an eye on that area, so he can't bomb them in chemical weapons again. He will consider another choice than the Russian bombardments and then evacuating 500,000 to Italy. We have this joke, if he is gonna evacuate them, he will need a year just to transform them in the green buses.
Not enough buses to take 400,000 people
to Italy. And all this plan of the green buses, and us as those who believe in human rights, accepting it as a reality. Whenever he doesn't like a whole community, he has the ability to evacuate them to totally different areas, and they can't go back. This whole approach is part of the problem, and this is also happening because there is no serious solution to Syria. Everyone is stuck with, it's too complicated, what we're gonna do with terrorism, and simple questions, and there's not enough pressure into politicians to do anything about it, even the war in terrorism. I'm sorry, your politicians are interested in their 40 years.
They're 4 years in office, right?
So they don't care
the long-term stability of a country like Syria.
I don't only Syria. So even their plans on war on terror, they will achieve a victory now, while they are in office. But this victory, if it's gonna be collapsed 10 years from now,
it's someone else's problem.
Yeah, and they don't care.
So tell us a little bit about the specific kinds of cases that you're trying to bring attention to, because I think when we hear at this stage about the war in Syria, or even a siege of a place like Ghouta, some people, even informed people, will immediately focus on the armed groups or on the strategic difficulty of envisioning a long-term stable solution, and you're focusing on something much more specific and tangible than that, which is families and individuals who are sick and who need either to get to medical treatment or to get medicine for themselves. A problem for which I think you would say there is a solution.
There's 572 medical cases that need safe access to health. When we say safe access to health, it means either their medicine enter Ghouta, which is easy because the UN and Damascus are entering, because Red Crescent are entering Ghouta. So please, while you are going in there, bring some medicine with you. And the other thing is cases that need treatment doesn't exist in Ghouta, either surgery. From this 572, we decided that a group of activists, we're gonna kind of adopt a case. Each one will adopt a family and be part of it, communicate with it on a daily basis regarding their kid that is sick. The idea started with the question, what if it is my kid? What would I do if it was my kid? So especially around 30, women have this kind of questions. Should I have kids? Not. I'm too late. So it started with the personal question, what if it is my kid and it's stuck and the medicine is 10 kilometers and I'm stuck with him and I can't secure him? It's emotional enough to have a sick kid to begin with. And being besieged also it's even harder. So I started to communicate with Muayyad's family. Muayyad has a brain cancer. He used to have a chemo, then the besiegement became complete, and his therapy stopped. So the brain cancer reacute.
How old is Muayyad?
9 years old. Yeah, and Muayyad's family have another kid who is 20 and paralyzed. But because he's not life-threatening, they didn't consider in the first Skype call to talk about him. To them, yeah, he is paralyzed and he has treatment outside, but he's not dying.
So they didn't even think that was a priority to mention.
Yeah, the priority is Muayyad having brain cancer. It started to affect his hearing, and that's why he is now a bit refusing to go to school. Other kids are bullying him about his hearing problem, and those who are not bullying him, dealing with him as the sick kid, pitying him. So he is refusing. At the beginning, on paper, I thought it would be easy. I'm gonna communicate with the family, try to push around media, but on a daily basis communication, you feel attached. You love Muayyad, you love the family. They ask you daily, is there anything new? Do you think we're gonna go out? And you don't wanna lie and say yes, you're gonna go out, but also you don't wanna to say no, you are not gonna go out, because sometimes hope is dangerous and sometimes hope is all that you get. So why Muayyad is there, I don't know. This is the logic I can't get. What is
So the solution in this case is quite
the
straightforward.
UN?
Would be for
The UN Damascus enter, take Muayyad and put him in the borders so he can go anywhere. We will manage to find around the globe doctors who are willing to treat Muayyad.
So all the infrastructure is in place for this problem to be solved. The United Nations has a huge operation based in Damascus. It's a 10 or 20 minute drive.
And they're entering.
To eastern Ghouta. So with UN pressure, they could drive in, pick him up, and bring him to a hospital.
When they entered last month, the uncle took Muayyad, and he thought naively maybe.
When the UN entered eastern Ghouta.
Yeah, he thought naively when they saw Muayyad, they will take him outside. And he also told them, take him alone. If it's a problem of us, his parents, take him alone to a hospital outside. But of course they didn't take anyone. They entered without medicine and went out without taking any of the medical.
So why don't they? Are they waiting?
They are becoming officials.
Are they waiting for permission from Bashar
They are
al-Assad's government?
waiting permission for those who are besieged. Like Bashar al-Assad is doing the besiegement, and he is giving the permission, and he is deciding what UN can do and what not. Neutrality, impartiality, all this principle are crushed in Syria. And if we don't question the UN rule by now, it's going to happen again and again and again. Because the sad thing, I meet with Yemenis activists. They talk about the exact same rule of the UN. When we talk about in front of Bosnians, they laugh. UN still doing the same exact techniques that they used to do with us. That's sad. That's not funny. This is the body that people thought that they created after World War II to prevent this mass atrocities.
And this is the body that's going to be that's already being expected to somehow preside over a just reconstruction of Syria if and when the war comes to an end.
It's a corporate body that cares about money, salaries, programs, hierarchy. And I think later on I don't know if later on, I think we need to question this, because if its main core is to bring peace, it failed. If its main core is to make the suffering less, it failed horribly in Syria. So yeah, they are able to do it, but there is not enough pressure. And they can be pressured because they are funded by all the European governments. They are not funded by Bashar al-Assad. So those who, as a feminist I know, who control money, control power. So in Syria, those who control money have no power at all, and that's strange. You are funding the UN, so ask the UN to do the medical evacuation.
Have you had any even limited successes with these medical evacuations?
They evacuated 8 from 572. So there is
In what time
15,
period?
like in 2 years. So there is 15 died on the waiting list, and there is 8 evacuated.
So out of 572 people that were assessed as needing medical evacuation, 8 were evacuated, 15 have died while waiting, and the remainder are still languishing inside.
There's 65 under 5 years old. So they are not dangerous to anyone. As I know, they are dangerous while crying, but that doesn't count. When you're like a crying kid, doesn't count as dangerous to have lack of access to health.
So even for someone who wants to throw up their hands and say a pox on both their houses, every side in Syria's armed conflict is awful, you can at least be on the side of these sick people and sick kids and say that helping them won't be somehow contributing to a bad political outcome, right? And use people can use those who have political capital can use it to pressure the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and their diplomats in Damascus to push for what is, after all, international law, right? I mean, isn't it international law that Syria theoretically agrees to, that there's free movement of medicine and of sick people even in besieged zones?
But it's not the first time that medical health is startlight. It's risky. He targets hospitals, he targets health workers, and now he is preventing health access. It's a torture mechanism outside of jail. He tortured you in jail. Outside of the jail, as a parent, he tortured you with your kid. And you will feel that you are willing to do anything, accept anything, if anyone gives you a solution for that kid. And even when you reach that point, no one tells you what you can accept. What is the options? Right now, I speak a really good English. I have a really good connection with journalists and activists around the world. And I reached the point with Muayyad case of, what can I do? Imagine a family that doesn't have access to internet, that lives under bombardment, and with a sick kid with brain cancer. So they don't know what is next now. They are waiting, and they don't know what they are waiting for. And small details. I wanted to buy him like a toy. And I sent one of my friends to look around what toys are available. And I'm a bit picky. I don't want a gender stereotype toys. I don't want armed guns, plastic guns, because it's violent. Okay, but I can't buy him a bicycle because his movement is gonna be affected in the next 2 to 3 months. So I don't wanna buy him something that's gonna be sad story in 2 months. So no scooter, no bicycle. I ended up with a small car that costed $50, which is plastic.
And you're having it bought inside Ghouta.
Yeah, of course.
To be clear, you're not buying it here and sending it. There's no way to do that.
I can't send them anything from outside. So this toy that has usually cost $2 from any $1 store you can buy something like it cost me $50 to. And I kept hearing people, buy him food, buy him something useful. You know, when your parents always in Christmas buy you something useful and you hate it? I told him, no, I'm not gonna buy him something useful. I used to be a kid. I still remember when I was a kid, I didn't want something useful. I wanted to play.
Marcell, thanks for taking all this time to speak to us. You've set up a website that people can go to learn more about the stories of people inside Ghouta?
A group of 50 volunteers work on this website. It's called Ghouta.com.
That's Ghouta.com.
Yes, and we are trying to translate now the basic information into 7 languages. All of the website and data in it is voluntarily collected and translated and designed. And it's basically to explain what living under siege means. And because to help our allies, and I still believe in humanity, I'm a big believer that we have allies outside and they are facing their own battle with Islamophobia, racism, and many aspects of these problems. So if they want to support, they will find it easily to find data, to print things, to do sessions, to have meetings with officials in their own countries. And in this website, specifically, we are asking people to pressure UN and WHO and their embassies and their parliament member into doing something to break the siege of Ghouta. We need three things basically: aid convoys to enter immediately, having a passage that is open, and safe access to help.
Well, Marcell, thanks again, and listeners who were moved or interested in what they heard from Marcell can go to Ghouta.com. That's again Ghouta.com to learn more about the siege and ways they can affect it. Thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
This is Thanassis Cambanis in Beirut with James Sadri, the Executive Director of the Syria Campaign.
Hi, Thanassis.
Welcome, James. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. We're going to talk today about where we've gotten with Syria and what organizations like James's have left to do at this sad stage of the conflict. Let's start off just very quickly by introducing our listeners to what the Syria Campaign is and what your role you are trying to play.
Yeah, sure. So we started a little under 4 years ago with a mission to elevate the voices of Syria's kind of non-violent civil society and do everything we could to try and galvanize the world around this mission of supporting a Syria that's peaceful and democratic. So we're a bunch of campaigners and NGO workers who come from a whole range of different backgrounds. My personal background is from Greenpeace and the BBC, but we've got colleagues from kind of Oxfam and Avaz and different groups, and we've all got a different personal attachment to Syria. I first went to Syria 20 years ago after finishing high school and, went back a whole bunch of times and, fell deeply in love with the place. So when the conflict kicked off, or when the uprising rather happened, a lot of us were dotted around the world doing different things. But a couple of years in, 3 years in rather, we felt like we wanted to bring those skills to try and elevate the Syria that we didn't feel was getting enough attention. People were focusing obviously a bit on the Assad regime, but much more increasingly on the extremist groups, the Al-Qaeda type groups and eventually ISIS. And nobody was really shining a spotlight on the Syrians in the middle, who are the vast majority of Syrians who, we often call civil society. So that's, when you say we bring our PR and professional skills, we just wanted to do anything we could to elevate those folks.
So for a lot of the years of the conflict, your goal has been to focus attention on crimes against civilians and also on the appealing revolutionary aspirations of sort of freedom-loving, middle-of-the-road Syrians. It would seem like that narrative didn't prevail, right? So to the extent that your struggle was to pass this narrative into, let's say, the Western public's consciousness, that there are a whole bunch of Syrians who are neither ISIS nor Assad, who want a better life and aren't extremists or fascists, and to a second level, that the biggest victims here have been civilians who have been barrel bombed and otherwise murdered by the regime. How come that's not the narrative that people think of when they think of Syria?
Well, I don't. I mean, it's a big.
Or maybe you dispute the premise.
Well, if you're saying how come the narrative in the West largely isn't that there's a Syrian pro-democracy force out there, is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
that hasn't prevailed?
Right. I mean, the narrative which I struggle against is that everyone in Syria, the only choice is either Bashar al-Assad or ISIS, and that there's nothing in the middle.
Yeah. Well, I think a large part of that is because the ISIS stuff has eclipsed everything else, and people are quite happy to see strongmen, dictators, authoritarians controlling faraway countries, and they don't feel that deep solidarity with others struggling for the same rights that they are, frankly, at home as well.
What do you learn from the story of the white helmets? I've encountered this a little bit directly myself, that anytime they're in the public eye, there's this sudden onslaught on Twitter and elsewhere of accusations that the white helmets are really a front for Al-Qaeda, or that they are a
an operation set up by the CIA, and that either way, the allegations are either that the rescues they do are faked, or even if they are rescuing people, it doesn't matter because somehow they're a psyop, an anti-Assad regime psyop.
Yeah, I think there's a massive disinformation effort, not just against the White Helmets, but clearly on the Syria conflict in general. We're really aware of that in the Western media around, let's say, the US election. Everyone's like, oh, there's a whole bunch of disinformation efforts here around Brexit in Europe, but nobody's really digging into that on Syria. And we've got a forthcoming report on this, and I sincerely hope that journalists and other interested folks start digging into it and go, how is this narrative on this key conflict of our generation being skewed by these state-backed efforts? Because there's a lot going on there. What's interesting on the White Helmets is they've had tens of thousands of articles in traditional media, mainstream media, credible media, whatever you want to call it, about them, and none of them has ever substantiated any of these ridiculous claims against them. And yet, online, on social media, where obviously there aren't any of those journalistic principles, all these smears are flying around at an extremely kind of high level. And it's deeply worrying.
What is still on the agenda? Given where the war in Syria is today, and the sort of sense that it's in a final phase, the conflict against ISIS is more or less done. The anti-regime rebels only remain in Idlib province and in Ghouta and maybe a couple of other tiny pockets around the country. And so the sort of sense that I hear is that if the war's not over, certainly the stage of the war when it was contested is over. So even if it continues now, it will be sort of a simmering insurgency. I don't know if you agree with that assessment, but in any case, what are the action targets for the Syria campaign at this stage?
Our focus has never really been the war in terms of thinking that can deliver anything positive. Any end to the violence that's going on will be a positive thing, but that certainly shouldn't mean an end to the struggle for the rights that Syrians rose up for back in 2011. And it's definitely my sincere hope that can continue, and we need to find a way to support that internationally. The problem is, if the war, or when the conflict stops above the ground, what will be a lot less visible to people is what's happening underground, largely in these dungeons where tens of thousands, if not more, people are being detained, disappeared, routinely tortured every day. That's the story of more than 4 decades of Assad regime control. But that is the primary vehicle by which the entire country and society gets suppressed, because everybody has a relative in detention that prohibits them from kind of speaking out. And that would be the ultimate failure, I think, of the international system if we let Syria fall back into that setup.
I would take exception to describing it as falling back, because it's that gulag and that mass detention and torture para-state has continued unabated the whole time.
Absolutely, but I think we have to recognize that there were glimmers, post March 2011, where whole swathes of the Syrian population experienced something different, and for the first time experienced what it would be like to come together collectively and aspire and dream for a different kind of future, for a positive future, one that they control. Obviously, those gulags and that detention and that torture continued, but there were pockets outside of government control where people could dream of something different.
A lot of your work has targeted, let's say, public opinion or governments in the West, trying to urge them to action, to care about the conditions of civilians, rule of law, etc. What do you see these publics in these states doing today as they get the message that Russia and Assad and Iran have won, and that Damascus is eager to do business, whether on extra-legal detentions of alleged terrorists or on business of reconstruction or
well, I think that there's different levels at which publics, if we're talking about international publics, can act. There's kind of direct support, and that's been really successful in terms of giving money to groups like the White Helmets. We've helped raise millions of dollars for those folks directly. The international political pressure that you're talking about, has been, frankly, a lot less successful. The international community has done pretty much nothing to stop the targeting and killing of civilians in the last few years. But what can we do now? I think what we can do now is not normalize the Assad regime and say, okay, well, just because the war's stopping, that therefore we can start pumping a whole bunch of reconstruction money to this guy who's repeatedly used chemical weapons against his own people, who's torturing and disappearing tens of thousands. So that's got to be a really, really clear message to the international community. And I would really challenge on a fundamental level this idea that because the conflict's over, that means that no pressure can be brought onto Assad, because that's assuming that the only pressure is military pressure on the ground. Whereas we know he's presiding over an incredibly weak state that depends on Iran, it depends on Russia, and they're totally plugged into the international system, and they're much weaker actors than we think they are. So, this comes back to the international game, really, and what is the international community prepared to do to stand up for human rights and democracy? We also shouldn't jump stages to assume that the Syrian conflict can end without it going through a core negotiated phase, whether that's in Geneva or elsewhere, I think is a big, big assumption. Like that, I'm no military analyst, but there's a lot that needs to happen before the Syrian regime has complete control of the country. And I think in those processes, wherever they exist, that's where we need to bring more international pressure to say, look, there needs to be some sort of credible way to create space within Syrian society, either to help envisage a future post-Assad, however that happens, and not just kind of wash our hands of it and go, oh, well, he's back for another 40 years along with his kids or whatever.
What have you learned from, or what are you trying to learn from this sad history of the last 6 years, in particular from the collective failure to do anything to protect norms against the use of chemical weapons, norms against the mass torture and murder of civilians, and the sort of beyond the politics, just the sort of sheer indifference of so many quarters to the crimes against Syrian people. I mean, it's a real signal event that the chemical weapons were the sort of sharpest edge that got attention, but the barrel bombs killed so many more people. Cheap, easy to use, easy to deploy, completely criminal,
and utterly indiscriminate.
Yes, criminal because utterly indiscriminate, and that barely registered a blip either in public opinion or in the sort of circles of where places where we expect outrage to translate into policy.
I mean, I've personally been so surprised and obviously quite depressed that for the last more than 3 years we've been doing everything we can to show what's happening on the barrel bomb front, and also with the work at the White Helmets day in, day out. I mean, this is happening dozens of times a day.
Was it over? Because to read coverage, one would think barrel bombing ended a few years ago.
No, I mean, obviously, it's just been happening continuously and still continues. But what I've been surprised about is, I think when everybody a few years back was clamoring about these barrel bombs and continued to say these are being rolled out of helicopters, these rusty improvised devices, and fall down, tumble down on neighborhoods, that someone would do something about it, and they're just being thrown out of helicopters. This isn't sophisticated weaponry, and yet for the world to do nothing, and us, well, not us, but our partners, to be documenting this stuff in thousands, tens of thousands of hours of YouTube footage. I mean, it's all there. People can see it. This isn't something that's happening, behind closed doors or in the shadows. That's what's really shocking about it. And I think there's big conversations around, we live in a world of proliferation of information, but where's the signal within the noise? And how does our kind of digital world actually, maybe it prevents us from being able to get that clarity. Maybe it's to do with what's happening to the media world around us. But there is a profound failure that we haven't been able to stop this relatively easy daily aerial war on Syrian civilians, when, let's remember, 4 out of 5 UN Security Council permanent members have been flying in Syrian airspace, bombing ISIS, and yet they've been doing nothing to deal with these, almost daily attacks on civilians.
Historically speaking, this has maybe been the best documented war ever.
Yeah, we've never had more documented evidence of mass human rights violations and war crimes committed in human history. I mean, part of that's just to do with the nature of the digital information revolution. But, the question is, what do we do with that if politicians aren't prepared to act? And I think, obviously, a large amount of this is to do with the absence of US leadership in the Obama administration post the Iraq War and the trauma of involvement in the Middle East. We're stuck in a Western narrative battle. This is much less to do with Syria than it's to do with the West and how it perceives its ability to protect civilians, to project its values. And that took a massive, massive hit, frankly, under the Obama administration. And I think we're paying the price for that in Syria as humanity.
Well, James Sadri, thanks a lot for your time and for the work you do
Thank you very much.
at Syria Campaign to connect what people are trying to do inside Syria with the world we live in out here and outside of Syria's borders. Thanks a lot.
Thanks again, Thanassis.
TCF World has been brought to you by the Century Foundation, a progressive public policy think tank that seeks to foster opportunity, reduce inequality, and promote security at home and abroad. For more information about Century's work, please visit tcf.org or follow us on Twitter and Facebook.